something that you really, really want to do, but you're worried that you don't have the time or you don't have the experience, or your garden's going to end up being a total flop because you don't get out there and do the things you need to do, this video is for you. Hi, my name is Landon Gilfillan of Pepper and Pine Garden Design. In this video, I want to talk to you about what I call daily maintenance, and how daily maintenance in the garden, even just 10 to 15 minutes a day or thereabouts, can actually help you have a very successful garden. Now, I'm not going to indicate by any stretch of the imagination that gardening is not work, because it is work, but it's scalable work. It's work that you can decide how much you want to do, how much you want to put in a week, a day, a month, and thereout to the year, depending on your needs, your goals, your desires, and your schedule, right? I have a huge garden. I have well over probably 4,500 square feet, probably more, since I added this extension back here this year. I have 5 kids ranging from ages 2 to 13. I homeschool. I have a lot of irons in the fire. So how do I manage a garden this size that's bringing in a lot of our food and a lot of the things that we use throughout the year? Well, that's what I'm going to be talking about in this video. How have I made this manageable? How have I made this where I can spend time in the garden, but not make it everything I do all day long? Now, there are days that I spend more time in the garden because maybe it's the beginning of the season where you're having to get everything in the ground around a certain time frame. Or maybe it's the end of the season during harvest, where if you don't get it in in a certain amount of time, you're either going to lose that crop, or it's going to succumb to frost or mold or whatever the case may be. There are absolutely periods of time within a harvest season where you're going to spend a little bit more time than you normally would on a daily basis. But outside of those things, daily maintenance in the garden can actually be incredibly doable, but you just got to have the foresight and maybe the planning to know what to look for. So here are my top tips for how to make daily garden maintenance manageable. And then you might find yourself being able to scale up in your garden size or in what you're doing once you have these things figured out. So for me, the number one thing is I do get up early in the morning. Now, you don't have to get up early in the morning to do your garden. If you work full time, you kind of have either the morning hours or when you get home from work. So that's kind of up to you and your schedule and what feels right to be able to spend time in the garden before or after work. For me, my work is mainly in the home, so I can come out periodically to do things out here, but I really don't like doing a lot of work in the heat of the day. And in the evening, although it's really nice outside, we have a lot of things going on in the house. So I really prefer to be out here early when everyone is still asleep so I can get the bulk of my work done without feeling like I need to be running back and forth to the house. Now, that's my situation, and I probably do spend more time out here than maybe most of you will, but the idea of it is to pick a time slot, a time frame that really works for you. Maybe it's when you come home from work, you immediately go inside, get some garden clothes on, and come out and do some weed pulling for 15 minutes, or some harvesting for 10 minutes, or just putting your eyes on the garden to look for pests or whatever it may be. Maybe it's in the morning before you shower. If you love coming out in the early morning when it's nice and cool and the birds are chirping, I mean, this is like the most glorious time of the day for me. My sister-in-law would completely disagree with me. She would absolutely not want to be out in the early morning hours, and that's her. So for you, pick a time of the day that works for you, your family, your schedule. That's the number one thing to look for. My other really hot tip, other than picking the time of the day, is coming out to the garden prepared. So I almost never come out to the garden, at least in the morning, unless I'm just coming out to harvest a specific thing, without my garden basket. This is my garden basket. In my garden basket, I always have certain items so that I don't find myself having to run back and forth from the house or to the garage. On rare occasion, is there something that I don't have in here that I have to go back and get? I just keep these things in here. I take them up to my mudroom at the end of my time out in the garden so that I can wash anything that needs to be washed. Mainly my diggers. I just forgot the name of this. My diggers and any of my clippers or anything like that I use. I always want to make sure I wash those after I've used them, especially if I'm dealing with blight or any sort of disease on a plant. So I just take them right up to the house or right into my garage, depending on what I'm doing the next day. But let me show you what I keep in my garden basket at all times. Gloves, because even though I use my hands for most everything, which is why I always have dirt in my fingernails, gloves are really handy for pulling out big plants or digging around for potatoes or whatever it is. So I always have a pair of gloves. I always have this, which for whatever reason, the name of it has completely left my brain for this video. I'll call it, my kids and I call it little diggers. So I always have my little digger with me. I always have my garden clippers. I use these for pruning tomatoes, for cutting off zucchini, for clipping Swiss chard or kale or whatever. These are the best. I love them, and I make sure they're always clean before I cut something. I always have my garden journal, and I've talked about this in my how I got organized video. This is for just any notes that I need to take, things I need to do, because I won't remember when I get inside. So I'll come out here and see, I need to harvest lettuce, I need to prune the tomatoes, whatever it is, I'll put a date on it in my book, and then I'll write those things down. Also, if I notice anything like pests or maybe something sprung up and I forgot I had planted it there, you know, I write those things down so I know exactly where everything is in the garden, and then I'll go update my final draft, my final copy that I showed you in that garden organization video, just so I know where everything is in the garden. So this is just really handy to always have on hand so that you don't forget something, so that you can keep update with what's going on in your garden. It's really, really, really a good habit to take garden notes and garden journal. Some people may roll their eyes at that, but I have become such a better gardener, such a more organized gardener, and I've learned so much more about my garden because I've taken good notes. So my garden journal. I always have now, since we're in this part of the season, my garden tape. This is like a elastic, stretchy kind of tape that I'm using to trellis my tomatoes. But once my cucumbers get going, or if I'm trellising anything else in the garden, or I just need something to go a certain direction, this has been a really great resource to use because it stretches, because it's reusable. So I always have that with me, because inevitably there's going to be a tomato plant that needs to be trellised to the fence or something along those lines, and I don't want to have to be searching for it later. So my tomato tape is what I call it. Of course, I always have a pair of scissors to either cut the tape or cut something that might need I generally use my garden shears for that, but like for cutting the tape, or just I find that I need scissors for some odd reason. Maybe it's cutting a flower or whatever the case may be. I always have a pair of scissors with me. This comes in handy for other reasons. If I'm harvesting big things, if I'm harvesting cabbage or zucchini, or the other day it was potatoes. Obviously my basket can double as a harvest basket. So I'll put whatever I need in here, and I'll set all my stuff on top of it and go straight to the house. And then I always try to have smaller harvest baskets, because like today I'm going to be harvesting some yarrow and some chamomile, and I don't want to throw that in the bottom of my big basket where it's going to get smashed or really dirty. So I'll have separate containers for those that are much easier to pull out. They're cleaner. So I just generally have these around my garden basket. Now, not always, but they're always within reach in my house, in my mudroom. I know right where they are. I can just go grab them if I know that I'm going out to the garden to harvest a specific item. So that is pretty much what I always bring to the garden, is my garden basket with all the items I just mentioned. It really makes it more of a streamlined, quick process, because I'm not spending 30 minutes looking for all my stuff, because that time will really add up if you're not careful. If you're looking for this and you're looking for this. I even had my garden shoes sitting on top of this basket, so I knew where everything was. I could just grab it and head out to the garden. That will save you so much time. So that's one of my biggest tips, other than knowing when to be out in the garden, is to have everything ready. Now, my other hot tip is just daily maintenance. One of the things I talk about, and I believe it's my garden design 1.0 class, is having your garden accessible to you. Don't have it someplace that's out of sight, out of mind, because I promise you, no matter how much you love to garden, you're going to forget to go out there on a regular basis, and then you're going to come out to lots of weeds, lots of pests, lots of out of control plants, and it really makes the whole gardening process really frustrating. So I say you need to have your garden right where you're going to be. My garden is right outside of my house, right off my driveway. I can see the whole thing from my front windows, and I planned it that way on purpose. Number one, because I love looking at it every morning. Number two, because I want to be able to walk straight out from my house or straight out from my garage, and here is my garden. So I really can't miss what's going on out here, because You really need to be in your garden, if not every day for 5 to 10 minutes, every other day, and that's stretching it. And here's why. Just walking around and having your eyes on your plants, noticing things that look different. If you have your eyes on your garden and your plants on a regular basis, you will very quickly notice if something is different. If leaves are missing because they've been chomped by caterpillars, if something's turning yellowing and spotty, that can happen overnight. I've had it happen with my potato plants that just completely succumb to blight or something odd overnight. And you will lose your plants to caterpillars overnight if you're not careful. They can just waste those things away in no time. Other things like pests. I was gone for a few days out of town, and when I came back, there were Colorado potato beetles all over my plants, and those were not there when I left. So those things happen really fast. So just walking through your garden, I always come out and do a garden walk at some time during the day just to look around and notice things. Have your garden journal with you and you can write it down so that you can come out during your time spot and take care of those things. The other thing I always do when I'm out here is I pull weeds. There's no way I could weed this whole garden in one sitting. It would take a very long time. That doesn't mean that my garden is completely inundated with weeds. It's not. It actually looks really nice, but that's because I'm out here every day just pulling weeds in a certain section of the garden. And then if I come back out, I'll pull a few more weeds, give them to the chickens, come back out the next day, a few more weeds. And over time, spending that 5 to 10 minutes of pulling weeds allows my garden to pretty much be not weed free, but way more manageable. If I wasn't doing that on a daily basis, then my garden would be completely succumb to weeds. So every time you're out here, pull a few weeds, throw them in your compost, throw them to your chickens, whatever you do with those scraps. But just pull something when you're out here and it's gonna make the whole process so much more doable. And then on top of that, just noticing what needs to be harvested. Sometimes because you're not out here, you're not harvesting. So those beautiful plants go to waste. And I have done that too, either because I forget, because I didn't write it down. So I had a huge lettuce plant I had my eyes on and I kept forgetting, right? Because I didn't write it down. And I almost lost that entire beautiful lettuce plant to bolting because I didn't get it in time. So you have to write it down. Put it on the notes on your phone, whatever it may be. Just get it down, be out here, and then harvest those things when you see them or when you need them. And I do suggest, if you like, having your recipes in mind so that those things don't sit in your refrigerator and then wilt away, because things like chard and mustard greens and spinaches, they will, wilt in your refrigerator quicker than like your zucchini and your cabbages and things like that. So, have a plan for the things you're harvesting so that they get used, but also have a plan for harvesting them so that they don't wilt away out here in your garden, succumb to pests, succumb to bolting, succumb to disease, and all the other things. So yes, there is some planning involved. Do I plan everything I harvest? No. A lot of times I'll take it inside and then I'll come up with a plan. But sometimes I make the plan and then come out and harvest. So you kind of have to figure out your rhythm. But the idea is to not just let it sit and go to waste. Harvest it and go in and look at a recipe on Pinterest, or look up a recipe on Pinterest and come out and harvest, however it works for you. But being out in the garden on a daily basis will help you to make that more manageable. And that's really it, you guys. Those are my top 3 tips: are knowing when you're going to be in the garden, pick that time slot if you need to. Otherwise, just make a point at the beginning of every day to decide when you're going out into the garden and then do it, right? If you stay at home with your kids, or if you work from home, if you haven't picked a specific time slot, then just know at the beginning of the day, you're going to say, I'm going to go out at this time, and then go. Otherwise, just know what the best time is to come out and do it. That's the best thing that you can do. The second best thing is to be organized and have all your things in one spot or in one basket so you're ready to head out. And the third thing is to be outside in your garden every day if possible. Take a break on Sundays, although for me, being out in the garden is a joy, so I'll still come out here on Sundays and look around. Being out here on a regular basis, having eyes on your plants, looking for pests, looking for disease, looking for the things that need to be harvested, and looking for weeds. That can be a 5-minute sweep of just coming through and looking at things, writing it down, and then the next day addressing those issues. Address the one that takes the highest priority. And then again, if you have some time at your desk or during a break, or if you're sitting with your kids watching a show in the evenings, just jot down a few things to do. Find a recipe for breakfast, you know, eggs and Swiss chard. I mean, just write down the things that are ready to harvest in your garden right now, and then come up with recipes for them so that you know that that food will be getting used or preserved, however you're doing it, before it goes bad. So having a plan for how you're going to use these items, I guess, would be my fourth hot tip. Having a plan for how you want to use your items. You know what's in your garden, so decide how you're going to use it or how you're going to preserve it or whatever your plan is, so that when those things are ready, you know exactly what you're going to do. Now, that doesn't mean you have every little detail planned out. I live on the fly a lot of times, but I have my tried and true recipes in my head that I know I can use those things for if I don't have another recipe ready. So just having a sketch of a plan of what you're going to use your garden for, how you're going to be out here, what you're going to be doing, that is what makes gardening doable for me in my state of life right now. Despite the fact that I love it, I could be out here all day, no problem, I would love it, but I just can't do that because of my schedule. So I do have to have a plan for when I'm out here and what I'm going to be doing. So that is my biggest encouragement to you. If you want to have a garden, absolutely, you should go for it, but it should have some sort of structure around why you're growing it, what you're growing, the time you're going to spend in it. Those things really help you to make that garden manageable and to make the most of what you're growing out here. I've seen lots of gardeners just basically lose their gardens because they're not weeding it, they're not spending time in it. It was way too big for the time that they had. And it's really sad to watch those things happen. So having a plan of action will really, really help you to maximize what you're doing out here and enjoy it more, and bring your family out and teach them and have them enjoy it as well. So I hope that this video was helpful for you, maybe encouraging if this is something you've always wanted to do but feel like you may not have the time. I promise you, you have the time if you have a plan. So just jot those basic things down that I've talked about and get a plan, whether for this year or next year, and go out there and grow your garden. If you've loved this video, consider subscribing, share it with someone else that you think it might be helpful for. And as always, my name is Landon Gilfillan here at Pepper and Pine Garden Design, growing gardeners and their gardens. And I'll see you in the next video.